Hey, everybody. Thanks for listening to the Marriage is Tougher Than Woodpecker Lips podcast. This is Bryan, joined by my co-host, Paul. We'd like to welcome you to a community meant for the men of the world to share their thoughts and perspectives on marriage. We can learn from each other's experiences and help each other be better husbands. This week on the pod, we want to talk to you about self-reflection.
And before we get all the way into it, I'd just like to say, if this is your first time, thanks for checking us out. And if you've been rocking with us for a while, welcome. If you would like to have a deeper conversation, please go to marriagestougher.com, which is our website. You can hit the contact form there and fill it out and leave us any comments, or you can search Marriage is Tougher on any social media platform. You can leave a comment there, or you can hit us up in our DMs. We'd love to continue the conversation. And we'd love for you to like or subscribe this episode, or to share it with anyone that you feel it would be beneficial for. All right, let's hop into the show.
All right. So when do you find yourself most in the mode of self-reflection?
When it's quiet. Which is really hard in this day and age, right?
Yeah.
Meaning, like, when I'm not doom scrolling, when I'm actually by myself, when I'm not trying to figure something out or take a kid somewhere or worry about what's the next thing on my calendar. So for me, it actually happens in the morning, sometime in prayer, pre or post prayer, or in the middle of it. But that's really it, because at that point, I'm asking God, like, to show me where I need work.
Okay.
And then I just sit and let my mind wander. And usually something comes up. It's like, man, that's it.
Yeah. I think I do it quite a bit in this space, right? While we're talking about marriage and talking about things we've done in the past, how we're growing, right? I think about it, or I find myself in that space when I'm trying to teach my children, right? Because I try to come from a perspective of, I know how I want things to be, but I also have to remember like where I came from and how it was for me when I was growing up, right? So if I put those together, right, then I can kind of relate to what they might be thinking or what they might be feeling, which has been a struggle for me, to be quite honest. I find myself, and maybe it's just because I have like a ADHD brain, but I find myself reflecting in a lot of different situations. In some situations where I probably shouldn't be, right? Like my wife could literally be having a conversation with me, and I might self-reflect. It sounds like a case of something.
So that's, yeah.
And it's funny because like I'll lose focus on the task at hand sometimes, and just find myself reflecting about my day. It could be something that she's even talking about in the moment, and I'm like, oh man, this used to be different, right? Like it's maybe it's a superpower that I can just
Maybe.
disassociate from reality and self-reflect.
Maybe.
It's wild though, man. What kind of benefits do you find?
Man, I think the main benefit is humility, right? When you self-reflect, you see the good and the bad, right?
Yeah.
At least you should. It should be a holistic self-reflection, right? A lot of times for me, it is where can I improve. It's not just reflecting as a whole, like what happened, but it usually progresses into that, right? Like, okay, so I was like this in this situation. What happened, before that, or what were the factors and all that thing and all those things. Um, so it reminds me that I'm not the most awesome person that I think I am all the time, right?
I got you.
And a lot of the time, we give ourselves the benefit of the doubt because mentally we know our intentions, but our actions don't always spew that. And everyone else can only take us by our actions because they're not in our brain. Um, so that also always checks me to make sure that my brain and my actions are lined up.
Hmm.
Um, so I think for one, it's humility. I think the second thing is perspective. Um, if you can, you know, focus out a little bit and see what other people may be seeing, um, that's a big thing. And I think the third one is uh, openness for communication or feedback about whatever topic it is you're reflecting on. Because if
That's
you're
good.
humble and you step out of the Zoom, then you're more open to see what others saw, and then that feedback won't feel as daunting or as attacking or as whatever negative thing that keeps you from giving feedback. So I think that would be, if I had three things, they just popped in my head.
Yeah, that was good. That last one hit hard though, and that is something I've had to learn specifically in my marriage, um, just to be able to consider someone else's perspective is is major, right? Because I think I was very much tunnel visioned about how I want things to be, where I wanted us to be, and all that. But like, by doing that, you're basically eliminating the consideration of your wife.
Mm,
So, and in all areas as well, right? Like just having her input, showing her that you appreciate her input, right? Um, and then going to my next point of, my self reflection allows me the space to choose to grow or stay the same.
that's good.
You know what I mean? And that goes hand in hand with accepting that this is a two-party organization. Right.
Right.
Um, but while I'm working on it, I think I've made a lot of progress in that area. And you know, it's it's a lot better. It's a lot better for sure.
That's good. How was making progress? Like, how did you get to there? Or yeah, I guess that's the question.
Yeah. Well, it was like I said, it was that choice to grow. So once I had that space of, all right, everything has been presented to me, right? Like I'm actually hearing what my wife is saying now, seeing how it's affecting her, seeing how it's affecting our relationship and how it has the potential to affect our children, right? And other relationships. All right, wow, let me sit in on that, right? And then in that reflection, I see, oh wow, I wasn't seeing how I was hurting her,
Hmm.
right? So it's just going back over our history, and man, I could only imagine how I would feel if she had done that to me, or if she had put me in that situation. Whew, all right, let me sit in that for a little bit. And then making that choice to not be that person anymore, or work really hard to mitigate, those types of things. Um, and then putting in the work, right? Like it's one thing to decide, all right, I don't want to be that person anymore, but it's a whole other thing to figure out how not to be that person anymore.
Yeah, that that's good. It's more being okay with taking a deep dive
Hmm.
into yourself, and really, that's the only way you can start the process. And once you start, like you said, continuing on, like I have all the evidence presented, so I got to go for it. If you're trying to grow, you
Yeah,
know,
yeah.
and hopefully you are, especially if you're listening to this. Um,
And then what I'll also bring up, and it was a point you made off air, is surrounding yourself with people that will tell you about yourself. And
yep,
accepting that as well.
yeah, that is. Yeah, I think. Speaking of that, I mean, I think there's such growth or there's such value to have a couple relationships where someone will tell you about yourself and you don't get defensive. I
Hmm.
mean, you what you said resonated with me so hard, but I didn't feel like the that visceral like I need to be defensive now. It's like, man, he's just right. Like you're just right. And it's fine. It's like, okay, now I gotta change my thinking and step up, right?
Yeah,
But
yeah.
there are people or certain situations where I could have like it wouldn't have came off that easy for me
Mhm.
to digest it. I mean, I think it's always funny because I eventually come around to the truth, right?
Right.
But we eventually come around to the truth, but it's better to just get it initially in that moment so you can move forward instead
Yeah,
of
yeah,
having to fight it, think about it for a couple of days, like, oh man, he was right. Nope, like, right. What do I need to do to get better? Um, so it's very important to have, and I even think about that because you think self reflection is just self,
hmm,
but it's more it's by your self reflection and reflection of yourself to others,
yes.
right? So you have to have others that can say, this is how you're presenting, or this is what I see for you to even grow to your max potential.
Right, right. And it thinks, or it reminds me of an exercise I did in like this small business training class, right? Where they asked, you know, text three of your friends, five of your friends, and ask them to give you your the top three characteristics that you know they think of when they think of you. And what I'm thinking about in this moment is that's a good practice, right? But that's also a snapshot. So I feel like you could change that picture over time, right? If you don't like what got reflected back to you, what things do you have to do to change the picture that's reflected back, right? Um, and I mean, I think that's a good way to measure your growth.
Yeah, that's fantastic. That is something I feel like I want to do right now. Um, yeah,
and and so here's the other thing: you have
be ready,
to,
be
yeah.
ready for it might not be what you think it's gonna be.
Right,
Yeah,
and you may want to include some people who may not come back with a favorable outlook.
yeah. I mean, we touched on that a little bit earlier. It's like the holistic view.
Yeah,
Like it's not just oh, let me the people that I present myself with, right? So you may
right.
want to ask your sibling.
Oh, hey.
You know what I mean? You may want to ask, a cousin you haven't seen in a minute. You may want to ask, someone, you know, a job or two ago, right? You may want to, because all those things are who made you who you are right now. So, yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah, that's a good way to get a real cumulative answer about who you've been, maybe who you are now. and then make the decisions about who you want to be. But man, going back a little bit, I have to say, leaving myself open and vulnerable enough to hear those types of reflective answers from my wife was so difficult for me. Because number one, I was just messing up, and nobody wants to be told about themselves when they're messing up, right? But if you put me on stage and I've been
Facts.
doing everything right, and you presenting me an award, yeah, tell me about myself.
Right. Yeah, we can roast if I've done a bunch of things. It's fine.
Yeah,
It's fine.
yeah. Oh man, it felt like a constant roast.
Man.
And then we have the nerve to say, "Oh, they're nagging." No,
Right.
you're just being told about yourself.
Right. Yeah, that's an interesting concept of, right, the quote unquote nagging wife, right? It's a reflection of something that you're not doing, right? And is it something that you said you were going to do?
Hmm.
Right? So do you need to grow in what you say you're going to do in a timely manner, not just your time, but a time that works best for everyone,
Right,
right? Is it uh something you've decided to do together that hasn't been done? Is it how you're saying things? So it's like all these like you need to grow moments, but you just might not like who it's coming from or how.
right, yeah.
Gosh.
And I think maybe for me it was partially how, but secondarily, like I wasn't ready to hear it, and I think that was probably the biggest one for me. Is just I I knew I needed to grow, but before I knew what steps to take to even like get a little bit closer to where I wanted to be, it felt attacking because I didn't know what to do with the information. Right. So I think in the moment it felt like I either can't change this or don't know how. And like I understand you keep bringing it up, but that's not helpful to me.
That's a that's a good point. So what I hear you saying is the what was being brought up was valid,
Mm,
but there were no tools to make the change. So it seemed like there was stress there
mhm.
because you didn't have the tools or the know-how to make that change at that moment.
Yeah, I mean, like imagine getting thrust into a new role at work and they have all these expectations of you for things you've never done before, right? Like, all right, hey, your deliverable is 2 weeks out, but I haven't gotten any training. We hired you because we believe you can do it. I
Well,
don't believe I can do
right.
it.
Right. Yeah, that's wild.
And I think it lends to the conversation of how to deliver feedback or how to deliver the reflection, right? And I think that's a good lesson any wife or husband can take, and make the decision to work on, because my goodness, was that such a hard time for me, right? And I think what you have to keep in mind is, yes, the communication is needed, um, but also come with some solutions, or also come with some ideas on how to progress, right? It's one thing to say, hey, I need this. It's another to say, hey, I need this, and I think it could look like this.
That's a great point because even in that, I think it could look like this can lead to other even if that's not the solution, it can lead to the solution.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
it's not just a you suck, it's a you suck, but I think you can get better like this.
Right, right. You got to create a dialogue for
Yeah,
solution, and
yeah,
I think that happened at times, But again, it's like you have to prepare to grow because if you're not ready to accept it, you're not ready to hear it. It's you're well. I'm speaking just from my experience. It was I've done X. She needs Y. She tells me about X, and I'm now hurt because I've been told about myself. I don't know what to do about it, and I feel like a failure.
yeah. That's I think because right, you've gotten past that point, right? And it's
Mhm,
not just I need to change my mindset, which it is, but it's also being willing to practice taking that feedback, right? Like it's almost like practice being open, but tangibly, like, what's that look like? Just don't react when you're getting that feedback. And almost like having to I would say a good way to practice that is, right, say you receive feedback, say it's from your wife, and you're not used to doing it, or you haven't gotten to where we are talking about where we are right now. But really, like, it's almost like study it, right? Like, okay, this is what I think I hear you saying, or this is what I think she said. Let me present it back, even not in the moment. Like, just take
mhm,
it like, yeah, I hear you. Okay. Whatever it is that how you guys move forward from processing that. And then circle back and be like, okay, this is what you said. What do you think we can do to get better? Or even admitting, like, I have no idea
mhm.
how. Like, you see that I'm failing at this every day. I don't know. Do you have any suggestions? Like,
Right, right.
so I think that's where it helped me. I won't speak for you, but it was like being open to practice having a conversation about it helped me when those things came up to realize that it is a conversation and uh, it's not just receiving that information. And I
Yeah,
think that helped me be better at receiving it.
yeah. As I'm thinking about it right now, I think there are two things to practice, right? Receiving and delivering. And on the receipt side, it is reminding me of like the image of an intervention, right? And there's so many times where you want to respond as people are quote unquote telling you about yourself. Um, but I think the practice of just sitting and listening and letting them finish before you either get defensive or want to talk on just one point because maybe it's multiple points that you need to work on or multiple points you're being told about practicing accepting that they have the floor, right?
Mm.
And giving them the chance to get it all out so you also have a chance to digest it before you respond, right? Because I think it could be or it could maybe feel easier to respond to one thing or you know i I used to play this game where I would respond to something that she maybe misspoke about, right? And it was just like trying to shift the dynamic of power. But if I force myself to listen and don't say anything until she's finished, that offers her also the opportunity before I jump down her throat about this word doesn't mean what you used it, right? To
Right.
correct herself or really fully form and deliver her thoughts. Right. So that's one. And then as far as delivery, right, we talk about using I statements, right? Not so like, this is crazy. You did this and you're X, Y, and Z. Like, I've been hurt. And that's been so difficult for me over the years, is just to admit to my wife that she hurt me.
Mm,
You know what I
yeah.
mean? But, I've been hurt by X, Y, and Z, right? It's just admitting that I've got feelings about anything, really. Um, I would really like it if we could go down a different path, however the conversation needs to go, but not putting on them. How do I want to say this? And I think we spoke about it before. Not putting on them that badge of shame, like right out
Hmm.
of the gate, right? Like, because if you're with someone who truly loves you, to know that you're feeling hurt and that they've likely caused it, they're gonna feel shame already. Like,
Right.
there's no need to compound it. There really isn't. Um, Maybe unless there's a history of you already having these conversations and not doing anything about it to correct the situation, but that's a whole nother story.
Right.
Um, I, I don't know. I think that's the best advice I can give on delivery right now. It's just the I statements.
I think those were valuable. Absolutely. Um, I know we're coming up on time. Is there anything else you wanted to mention in this?
Um, if anything, I liked the statement about having the space to make the decision of, am I going to stay the same or am I going to change? And then providing yourself or your spouse the grace and space to do so.
There you have it. Self reflect, decide what you're going to do with the reflection. That's awesome. Um, well, we thank you for making it through an episode with us. Again, if you think this is of value, please share it with someone. And you can like and subscribe so you can stay up to date for when we have new episodes. Um, Head to marriagestougher.com. If you'd like to be a guest, fill out that contact form and we'll get back to you and we can talk about how to make that happen. And if you'd like to go deeper, just search Marriage is Tougher on any of our social media platforms. We appreciate you and we'll talk to you next time.
Peace.